Hello and welcome. My name is Brian Gishan Omwenga. I'm a Kenyan. I'm currently a PhD candidate at the University of Nairobi, where I'm pursuing a PhD in computer science. I carried out this research together with my supervisor, Professor Timothy Waema, and our research area is primarily around data, the tech innovation ecosystem, as well as modeling and data modeling. We will be presenting this paper on an ecosystem-enabled framework for digital cooperation and proposing a collaborative platform for the support of technology-enabled entrepreneurship. Looking at the background of this research, we can first look at Africa, and we are aware of the various challenges that businesses within Africa experience, particularly startups and tech innovation experience quite a lot of challenges in terms of scaling and in terms of sustainability. And we very rarely get to see startups within Africa scaling across the entire continent and across the entire world. Part of this is because of the ecosystem challenges that exist affecting these startups and affecting these entrepreneurial businesses. It can almost be alluded to that the challenges experienced by these businesses are similar to the challenges in the wild savannas of Africa. It is extremely challenging for these businesses to survive as well as for these businesses to scale. At the same time, we are also aware of the advent of the digital economy. Many economies are actually moving towards being digital economies, evolving towards digital economies. And this was accelerated more recently by the global pandemic, where we saw quite a number of sectors having to leverage digital for purposes of delivery and for purposes of survival. Together with this, of course, at a much wider global scale, is a reality that we are living within our fourth industrial revolution, a digital revolution, primarily driven by big data, IoT, etc. So it is important for us to take a look at startups and tech innovation within Africa and see whether there are any ways in which they can be encouraged to scale and encouraged to be more sustainable. And with this, our research then set out to take a look at this enabling ecosystem that these technology startups require. We undertook an exercise attempting to define and map this ecosystem, as well as looking for indicators of say, the ecosystem. Beyond this, we looked at ecosystem representation as a platform, a way in which this enabling ecosystem can actually be virtualized and delivered to these tech innovators. Then at the same time, we looked at mechanisms of its deployment, how it can be scaled based on design, and eventually, of course, looking at ways of measuring and learning within the said ecosystem. When looking at our research approach and methodology, we actually set out looking for empirical research around what we believe this ecosystem within Africa looks like. We were initially guided by our conceptual framework, as you can see at the bottom of this slide, that set out the cycle of a tech innovation or an innovation-driven entrepreneurial idea from the moment of its inception, either as a result of R&D or as a result of an opportunity within the market, to its actual the development of the product, the actual development of the product, and then the presentation of this product to the market, accessing a market. And that was the basic cycle we looked at that assisted us develop a semi-structured survey that we felt would be useful to present to respondents for purposes of asking them what they perceived the ecosystem to be. We embarked on this research primarily in Kenya, but because we also wanted to have a more representative understanding of the ecosystem, we also selected a country within the East African region. This was Rwanda, where we also administered the same survey. And for purposes of also controlling for representation across the whole of Africa, we then chose a country that was outside the region, and we chose Botswana, where we also administered a similar survey to respondents within the sample space. The case study of the countries chosen was actually driven by a country analysis, which is partially described within the paper. Beyond this, then we administered the semi-structured questionnaire, and we were able to reach about 91 respondents of our targeted 100. And these were quite a number of respondents from those who identified themselves as innovators, investors, academia, research, technology entrepreneurs, students, policymakers, etc. Each of these individuals have a very specific view of the ecosystem. And our belief is that the totality or the summation of their views would actually give a good representation of what we could then term as a tech innovation ecosystem. After administering the survey and collecting the results, one of our primary high-level representation of the ecosystem can be divided into these three, if you call them, linkages. We identified a set of ecosystem players, agents, and intermediaries who were involved in either contributing or supplying to some extent into the tech innovation ecosystem. So this would be supply of goods, supply of services, or supply of knowledge and finances into the said ecosystem. We termed these as backward linkages, and then there was a set of institutions and agents who would then act very immediately for purposes of the creation and the development of the said tech innovation or of the said entrepreneurial idea. These were, for example, people in government or government institutions, ICT, manpower, skilled labor, quite a number of other supporting subsectors such as energy, infrastructure, etc. And then, of course, there was the actual route to market at the end of the entire exercise. So we divided these, you could call them participants and institutions within the ICT or within the tech innovation ecosystem into these three different major groupings. And this was also driven primarily by theories of sectoral systems of innovation that are attributed to Malherbe, which basically more or less paraphrased to mean any individual, any agent, or any institution that gets involved in the production of such a tech innovation then forms part of that system of innovation. So from the actual moment of inception of the idea to the delivery of that idea in the form of a tech innovation or a technology-enabled business, any of the individuals along that value chain then form part of what we would call the effective ecosystem. Once we highlighted the ecosystem, we then understood that it is this ecosystem that is responsible for the delivery of and the support of the business. Our question therefore was, is it possible for us to then virtualize this entire ecosystem and deliver this ecosystem as a platform to the tech innovator, wherever the tech innovator is? So we undertook an exercise of virtualization that was primarily driven by a conceptual understanding of what precisely it is that, that can be delivered through ICT infrastructure. And our conclusion based on our research was on two things. ICT infrastructure is helpful when it delivers data in the form of knowledge or in the form of insights, or when it delivers a given service. And this service is typically a programmable business process. So for instance, a government process of business registration can be delivered to a tech innovator or a tech entrepreneur in the form of data, informing them about what form of business they should be registering, and also the service component, which is actually the process of registration. We then realized that such a platform that would have to include as many services as possible would be, you're probably looking at tens of thousands of players within the said ecosystem. And it would be extremely difficult to list all of this within a singular platform. So therefore, the proposal was to integrate all these services in the form of libraries, in the form of open API libraries, through which each innovator can then create their unique ecosystem around it. But to also increase more understanding around this, we divided all these players into 9 different domains. That was also guided by the ecosystem study that we did earlier. Then very quickly, just to conclude, we're looking at a situation where you might have a startup in Kenya that wants to go and expand and scale, say, into Rwanda. Barring the fact that the Kenyan innovator has to present themselves physically within Rwanda, they will still have no idea what it is they need for purposes of setting up a good business within Rwanda, for purposes of connecting to banks within Rwanda, etc. That is why we believe that if it is possible to then create this entire ecosystem in Rwanda and present it or on a unified platform, then the Kenyan business will be able to expand into Rwanda, accessing the SAGE services as an enabled environment for purposes of growing their business within Rwanda. So we believe that a unified virtual ecosystem can be very helpful for creating enabling environments across most of Africa for purposes of expanding business and making projects such as the Africa Continental Free Trade Area a reality. It also offers those scaling avenues across different ecosystems around Africa. We conclude by promoting, by pushing for the promotion of these virtual hubs and these virtual science parks that would then be useful for access to tech innovators across the entire continent. Thank you very much, and I think we will be open to take questions.